Hi, folks. Larry Rolla here. I want to thank you all for showing up last night at the live that I had at 8 o'clock. And because there was an interest, we're going to do it again this Tuesday night. For this week only, we're going to start at 7, not 8. I'm still learning. I still have to thank the people that come on. I'm still learning how to read all the comments that come in and the questions. So I'll get better at it every week. I have some friends helping me out until I get it. So I just want to thank you all and just keep your cards and letters coming in. All right, now I have an apology to make to a good friend of mine and his family. It was about last week's podcast when I talked about Con Erico, and I described his eldest son as a bad, bad kid without really knowing all the facts. All I know is that he was in jail for life. So I just assumed, and that's what happens when you assume, you screw up. Well, that evening after the podcast, I got a call from Anthony, his cousin, my friend, and they were a little upset that I said that he was a bad, bad kid, and naturally I apologized immediately. And he told me the story, and I says, Anthony, and I'm not going to remember what you told me. Do me a favor, write down the particulars, because I have to let the people know on that listen to that podcast that not only that I was wrong, but get the right story. So write something up and send it to me, which he did. Now, I'm going to read what he sent me word for word, because I don't want to screw up again and I don't want to leave nothing out. So whatever he sent me, that's what I'm going to read. And here it goes. He starts off with just some background information on my cousin Scott, who, of course, is Con Erico's oldest son. Not to indulge too much in his legal issues, he was convicted of smuggling marijuana from South America with several associates back in the early 80s. At the time he was arrested, it was 1985 at the age of 29. It was a $700 million venture that lasted a couple of years or so until he was arrested by Scotland Yard and charged with smuggling and a murder that to this day he continues to profess his innocence. There was no body or weapon ever found. His first trial resulted in 12 jurors, of which 11 voted for acquittal. The judge offered him 20 years. Scott then appealed, and the second trial did not end in his favor. So the same judge who offered him 20-year sentence gave him 50 years to life. He is not up for parole until he completes 50 years on his sentence, a real injustice of our justice system. While in prison, he became vice president of the Lifers Group, working with many prisoners to help them cope with prison life. He then went on to complete a college course and earned his degree in theology, where he is now a minister. He now spreads the word of our Lord, giving comfort to all prisoners. On many of our visits to the prison, his mother, Joan, who would accompany us, Scott always would give to the other inmates in the visiting room who had little or nothing, as much of his food and drink as he could. He would go as far as giving them a pencil or pen and paper, as many had nothing. His mother, Joan, was a dancer at the Copacabana in New York and was often invited to Frank Sinatra and Howard Hughes's table. She was a top model with Mademoiselle. She often accompanied designer Betty Carroll to Europe to shop the stores. Joan lived with myself and my wife, Andrea, in Florida for the last 5 years of her life. My uncle, Con Erico, was given the nickname Scamp and was known to his family and friends as Scamp. He became a well-known jockey back in the mid to late 40s. He was approached by Larry Rolla, who had been a friend of mine and my family for 50 years. Together, they fixed many races. He was convicted of race fixing after his racing career came to an end. The judge at his trial told him that the key to his cell is in his mouth. He ratted on no one and took the rap and went to federal prison, I believe, for 10 years. Larry can go into further details on that. My perspective of Uncle Scamp and my friend Larry is that they were more than just two people fixing races. Growing up with my Uncle Scamp, he was the most generous and kind-hearted person that I was fortunate to have in my life. He once told me that if he had a nickel for every dollar that he lent people that he never got back, he'd be an extremely wealthy man. He had a deep love for his mother and bought her a three-family house in the Bronx, which at that time many members of my family lived there when in need. He was even let out of prison for a day with of course, two men in suits to visit his mother, who was dying in a hospital. I remember that day well because he was such a sharp dresser and was making fun at his prison issued shoes. As far as Larry, I know him since the mid-70s. Knowing Larry, I really did not look at him for his race fixing. I knew him for the trainer driver that he was. He had a real compassion for horses. I never knew him to ever abuse one. He would do things with horses that I did not think would be possible and made them become successful racehorses. I could only imagine if it was not for the injustice of him being barred from the two major New York tracks for something he did not do. I truly believe that Larry would have been in the Racing Hall of Fame. He truly had a love for horses. I also know him to be a very generous friend to people that were in need, and in my opinion, to people who didn't deserve his generosity. My brother Dominic worked for Larry in Florida and took care of Wildwood Jeb and a horse in Clover. I myself was stabled in the very next barn where Larry was stabled. He would drive by my barn to get to his barn, maybe sometimes a little too fast with his car, splashing in puddles, of course, with no harm intended. So that is how I look at these two people, not as being known as race fixers, of whom people might condemn them on, but for the people as I know them to be kind, generous, compassionate men. Larry, you are more than welcome to read this as it is. It is my words talking about three people who touched my life. My wife, Andrea, is the writer in the family, so she helped me with my grammar, so I don't sound like a second grader. That's what he wrote. And once again, I apologize. And from what I understand, Scott had nothing to do with that murder. And that's why he didn't take the plea that the judge gave him. And now he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. It's sad. But I apologize for what I said. And I hope you accept it. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna start telling some stories that were left out of the book. When I started writing this book, I called up 3, 4, 5 months people all around the country that used to work for me or that knew me or that I worked with or raced with, and we had so many stories. And it was Nicholas Pileggi and Richard Price that, and also Steve Moscow told me that there's so much material that if we're going to make it a movie, we're going to have to leave a lot of it out. And originally, it was going to be a movie. I start eliminating a lot of stories. And that's why I always said the book contains, and what I talk about is probably 10% of the whole story. And each chapter is 10% of that chapter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking about stories that were left out of the book that will might give you more of an insight and more questions that you could ask on Tuesday nights. Now, you all know that when I left Lincoln Downs because of Tony Schuler, we started fixing a few races. And I wind up leaving there with probably $30,000 or $40,000. And when I got to Monticello, I was in pretty good shape. And this that I have here, you can see is titled a story not in the book. So I'm gonna read it because I just took this out of that whole Against All Odds file, and so I'm gonna read it, and this is one story that we left out that was going to be the start of this whole ride that I went on, and it started. It's in 1971. And I'm just going to read through it so I don't leave nothing out, and it'll go pretty quick. After Lincoln Downs race meet, I was over. I shipped to Monticello, and soon after that, arriving there, a beautiful young Spanish girl walked out of one of the tack rooms I was assigned. She was about 18 years old and spoke very, very little English. And I called for Odell, and I asked him to find Manny. Odell and Manny were leftover grooms from the Thoroughbred meet at Lincoln Downs, and after a few weeks, I just hired them, and they came with me to Monticello. Manny spoke Spanish, and she told the girl. Told Manny that her name was Jonna and that she was working with the horses in Florida. And when the race meet ended, she got a ride in a horse van and was dropped off here at Monticello. She said she was looking for a job and had no money. She was scared and she had no place to stay. She said that she was from Cuba and that her father sent her to the United States last year after her mother died. I told Manny to tell her not to worry, that we'll take care of her and give her a job. I asked Manny, I gave Manny a few $1,000 and a few $100, and I told him to take her to town and buy her some clothes, feed her, and set up a tack room for her. And we'll take it from there. I told him to stay with her and teach her my way of grooming. And through the weeks, the two got along really great, and they soon became inseparable. After a few months, she came to my office with Manny and said that she really liked working for me and that she wanted to stay, but was afraid that she might get caught up in one of the sweeps that the immigration people made every two or three times a year, at all the racetracks. She asked me if I could help in getting her papers or whatever was needed for her to stay here legally. And I knew nothing about that stuff. And I asked around and found out that the fastest, easiest way is for her to marry a U.S. citizen. So the next day, I called her and Manny in the office. I asked Manny if he was born in the United States. He said he was. I then laid out a plan that would help both her and Manny and solve the problem. I offered Manny $5,000 if he would marry Jonna. I told him that I would set them up in a house trailer and get them a car, and after a year or 2 years, if they decided to stay married, I'd sign everything over to them, and give them $5,000 as a wedding gift. If they wanted to just get divorced, I'd pay for the divorce. They both agreed. The following day, they got married, and Manny made me the best man. And 10 months later, I was the godfather to their firstborn. They were truly happy and in love and crazy about their beautiful little girl they named Renee. Now, I'm reading this the way I wrote it that was supposed to go into the book. Jonna became a stay-at-home mom. Everything was great. My stable was growing, and Manny became my second trainer. After a couple of weeks, Manny came to me with some bad news. He told me that when Jonna was in the hospital giving birth, she was diagnosed with a faulty heart valve. It was a life-threatening situation, and I screamed at him. Why didn't he tell me right away? But he didn't. We sat down to discuss the situation and, of course, treatment and care for Jonna. At that time, neither the racetrack nor the racing commission or myself provided any kind of health insurance. So with the help of Charles Slutsky, who was the owner of Monticello Racetrack, I made arrangements with a doctor he hooked me up with, and the hospital for the operation that Jonna needed. I spoke to the doctors in the hospital, and I took full responsibility for any and all services that were to be rendered. That night was a tough one. I made a couple of commitments that I had to keep. Commitments that went way beyond my earning capacity. In my head, I justified my decision by telling myself that sometimes a man has to do what he has to do in spite of personal sacrifices or consequences, especially if in his mind you were doing it for the right reasons. It was at that point that my social sports betting grew to what I considered to be a supplement to my income. And it was only a matter of time before that supplement became not only an addiction, but a life-changing problem. During my years at the track, I learned a lot. I learned who to deal with. I knew who the stand-up guys were, the bust-outs, the corrupt, the rats, and the desperados. I learned that rats, greed, and corruption and incompetence were in every phase of the horse business, from the trainers to the drivers to the jockeys to the state officials and everyone in between. I also knew that someday all of this could be a lifeline. The operation was a success, and within weeks, Jonna was home. After my work was done at the barn, I took Manny to lunch. And during lunch, I told Manny to stay home with Jonna and take care of the kid. I told him not to worry about the money and that everything was going to be okay. That day, sports betting and race fixing became my only form of earning what I needed to fulfill the commitments I made. And it was then that the ride began. Now, we never put that in the book because we had to chop a lot of stories out of the book. They went on to stay married and stayed with me for all the way up until '84 when I got bored. And today they're still alive and well and doing very, very well. That was one of many stories that I had to leave out of the book because if it was going to be a movie, we have a screenplay written, and it has over 400 voiceovers in it. And a voiceover, for those of you that don't know, are you can eliminate 15, 20 pages just by one or two voiceovers and some quick shots. So that's why later on, after I met with Nicholas Pileggi, who you all know wrote Goodfellas and Casino, and Richard Price, who wrote The Wire for his TV series, which they say is one of the best series ever written. They said it has to be a TV series. So right now, after all these strikes are over, we're going to probably make it a TV series. We already have a script written, so it could be a movie into a TV series or whatever. Anyway, every Tuesday, I'll probably add another story that is not in the book. And then every Tuesday night, you'll have more material, especially for those who haven't seen all of the podcasts that I have up. You'll have more questions to ask pertaining to the stories that I tell at 2:00. So that's what I'm going to do. I really like the lives better. I like it better. It's a little tough for me right now because I have to get used to reading the comments and the questions that come in. And a lot of them are good, and a lot of them I have to pass. But I have a friend of mine reading it for me and yelling them out to me. I just got to get used to it, and I will. And things will speed up, and they'll get better. So just stick with me because I like that better, and it enables me to tell more of the story than what's out there. So that's it for today. Please tune in tonight, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I could. I'll try to get better at this live stuff. And you just got to remember that my whole life I went around in circles, and this is all kind of new to me. But I like it better this way, and I'll see you tonight. Bye. Just a reminder, tonight's live will be at 7, not 8.